I'm Dale Smith for Loony Politics, and one of the more contentious bills that's going to come up right when Parliament resumes is C-11, which is the government's changes to the Broadcasting Act in order to capture online streaming services. Now, this has been particularly contentious because there's been a big misinformation campaign around what this bill entails. And really what it's supposed to do is just ensure that streaming services pay into the same Canadian content ecosystem that over-the-air broadcasters do. And that includes things like YouTube disclosing what their Canadian ad revenues are so that they can put a portion of those towards this same ecosystem, which helps generate Canadian content through development funds and so on. But along the way, this became falsely derided as some kind of a censorship bill. And bizarrely, we had conservatives claiming that this would mean you had government censors who were going to look at people's tweets and so on, which was never actually remotely the case. And yet this is what the narrative became. Now, this bill spent the entire last session in the Senate at committee, which was a record amount of time, 67 and a half hours at committee. We've never seen a bill have that much study before. And at the end, they came out with something something like 76 amendments were proposed and 26 were adopted. And that's going to all come up for negotiation with the government, essentially, once Parliament resumes. It's just passed report stage at the Senate just before they rose for the winter break. It's going to have third reading debate when they come back. And then it's going to go off to the House of Commons, where the government will have to decide which of those amendments they want to live with and which of those they're going to reject. And there's a wide variety of amendments, including ones that completely remove the user-generated content sections of the bill in order to ensure that there's clarity. There's some which purport to safeguard the independence of the CRTC in some of the decisions it needs to make under this legislation. And there is even one amendment from a certain senator who wanted to ensure that internet service providers would block explicit content from people under the age of 18, essentially trying to sneak in her own bill, which is a standalone, into this piece of government legislation. And that's a huge privacy nightmare and quite probably unworkable. And yet this is also one of these decisions that the government is going to have to make on, is this amendment they can live with, or one that they're going to reject. At that point, it's going to come up to how much the Senate is willing to insist on some of these amendments and how much they're going to accede to the government's wishes in terms of which ones they're going to adopt and which ones they're going to reject. And we could see a situation where the bill goes back and forth a couple of times, depending on how much senators want to dig in their heels and insist on some of these. It's almost certain that the Senate will eventually pass the version of the bill with whatever amendments that the government is going to live with or reject. But that doesn't mean that this will go quietly. And for a bill that has been subject of so much misinformation over its lifespan, it could be a really dramatic showdown. For Loony Politics, I'm Dale Smith.